I know it's kind of a long day for you, but this is a very important topic for us, and we really are privileged to be hosting this conversation today with all of you, and really glad to be working with BizFed on this very prescient and important issue for our region. It's one of those invisible policy issues. It's not one that's in your face, but if you're not ready for it, it could be totally disastrous for us. Now, SCAG has been very prominent in planning for resiliency. We underwent an effort a couple of years ago and lasted about 2 years with the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Community, I believe. And they went through all of our cities, and really that's our job as a regional body to try and enable our cities to do good planning. We can't do it for them. It has to be something they do themselves, and we're able to get all of our 191 cities visited with the emphasis and conversation on earthquake preparedness over a period of about 2 years. And that report's on our website somewhere. I'm sure we can find a copy for it if you're interested. But the excitement out of that is to get our small cities. Not everybody is the County of LA. I think that was an excellent presentation by the county, and the city is doing some wonderful things. They have the capacity to do things like that. Most of our 191 cities range in population from about 1,200 people to maybe the average is about 70,000, and the largest obviously is LA. And so what I was asked to talk to you about today is our regional plan. We are required by federal and state law to do a regional transportation plan every 4 years, and we're in the process of completing the next iteration of our regional plan. The current plan was approved by a board in 2016, April of 2016, and the 2020 plan will be approved hopefully by a board in April of 2020. We call this plan Connect SoCal. It's the 2020 Regional Transportation Plan. Sustainable Community Strategies is the official name, but we call it Connect SoCal because it's intended to provide this unifying vision for our 6-county area, which is home to about 19 million people, expecting that will grow to by about 4 million over the next 20 or so years. How do we accommodate that kind of population? And sustainably, I should add, and how do we make sure that we continue to maintain the edge that we have as the most vibrant economic region of the country, if not of the Western Hemisphere. So these are things we have an economy that is probably the 16th or the 15th largest in the world, if you were a country. So it's something to be mindful of, that if we have a disaster, it could be the ruin of that economy in how we plan for it, or how we're prepared for the potential of a disaster. In the 20-year period that we have our plan set for between 2020 and 2045, we are assuming that there will be a big event. I think it's just common sense for those who follow science to assume that there is a high likelihood there will be a big event. And so resilience is an element of our plan. And so when we were starting to develop our plan, we wanted to figure out, well, who are we planning for? You got to look at the demographics of the next 20 years, which is our destiny. And our sense is over the next 20 years, we expect that 65% of the population growth over the next 20 years will be 65 and older. And so this is not news to you. We know we're aging in place. I'm aging in place. I move slower now. But we also had to pay attention to the fact that even though we're aging in place, we would still have children amongst us. We'll have working population amongst us, and these are elements of our population to plan for. But the senior population will be a little bit more and probably more agile than we're used to, and so mobility for that population is important. We expect household growth as a result of that population growth. Household formation is a little slower these days, but we expect a household growth in these general areas, places where there is a population. Our plan is to encourage more growth where you already have infrastructure, so we're not taking on new land, for example, or we're not eating up ag land and natural preserved land for that population growth. We know that there will be technological implication to our growth into the future. We're seeing the elements of technology with us. When we did the 2016 plan in April of 2016, we didn't have a whole concept for what Uber and Lyft was going to be. You couldn't think of transportation today without thinking about the TNCs. And so thinking about transportation in terms of technology and actually being open to and planning for disruption has become part of our frame going forward, and how technology will be implicated in how we travel. And so the fact that we're aging in place, I think the opportunity for technology is really tremendous, such that you could get places without owning a car. We wouldn't have thought about that 10 years ago. It seemed like everybody needed a car. Today, you could imagine that we could get places without a car, and more so. And maybe people will try scooters too. I've tried it. I will not try it too often. But I want to point to scooters because they are part of the mobility mix in terms of micro mobility and connecting, especially as we continue to rely and build on our high capacity transit corridors. We need those first mile, last mile connections. And we're seeing the electric bikes and the scooters, the micromobility and the TNCs as the feeders to those high-capacity transit corridors. So the plan process, I know I have a little bit of a constraint on time here. The plan process started almost 2 or 3 years ago now, June of 2017. We started the process, what we call local input, which is talking to each one of 191 cities and 6 counties, 197 separate governments, how to be dealt with one-on-one, and their local planning was basically taken into consideration. And we met one-on-one with all 197 of them. We took that conversation, which really was based on their existing plans, their future plans, their general plans, basically, and then looked at what the data says in terms of census and the American Community Surveys data, what that says about current and future population, households, and employment projections. And then we also looked at what they are already working on in terms of best practices for transit supportive activities, and then took that into a scenario development process. And so we are doing regional planning. So let me just preface this. We're doing regional planning to try and figure out how this region grows cohesively, because the essence of regional planning is to suggest that while city government is really the best government because it's closest to the people, there are things that transcend those boundaries, and transportation, air quality, resiliency. These are some of the things that go beyond individual city boundaries that require a conversation at the regional government. The reason you have a room this big is my board is 86 members, and we meet once a month, and we actually survive it. So, and I see that look on your faces. We actually survive it because they want to come together to work together as a region to continue to keep this region humming and vibrant economically and sustainably. So we did scenario development and then took those scenarios and went to the public and spent about 2 or 3 months talking to the public and sort of trying to figure out what their reaction would be to the various scenarios of the future for the region. We got a lot of input from the public on the scenarios that we put out. Those were not intended for you to understand, so don't even try to understand the maps. But the slides will be available for you for further review and questions in the future if you want. So we went out to the public in May and June, basically, and came out of the public process. It was a very extensive public process, more than we had ever done before. Came out of that process with a lot of insights from our public and from our elected officials and folks that were available to that were able to comment on the plan, both as on surveys. We had street corner people, those people that bug you on the sides of the road when you're going to lunch. We had some of those, so I have to apologize for that. But we also use, I think what was actually more exciting about this is we use community-based organizations to get at populations that don't typically follow the things that we do. There are a lot of people, believe it or not, that don't care about what we do. Not that they don't care, but they don't have the time to participate in planning stuff and showing up at public meetings because they're busy working and taking care of their families. And so being able to use community-based organizations that actually are within those communities to bring them out was very important to us. And through that, we're able to get to another 1,500 people through the CBOs. What we heard varied. These are real common sense things, but these are things that were on people's minds. And sometimes you might think, as technocrats, we might think, oh, people just don't know what's going on. Well, they are very perceptive about what's going on. More so, they know what they want and what they'd like to see in their communities, and it was really interesting to listen to them. Just summarizing from amongst all the 6 counties, the top 3 things that came out of each county were very, very. We were talking mostly transportation mobility. They were wanting to talk about housing. Duh. I mean, it's the most important thing in our region today is housing and the housing crisis. And I think, and we think around here, that it's an existential issue. If we don't solve for it, we continue to lose our edge as a region because we're losing talent because we can't afford to house them here in our region. So housing affordability is a big deal. Of course, traffic congestion continues to be a big deal. These were some of the CBOs that we engaged. Some of them might be familiar to you, but they were very good at getting to people that traditionally don't participate in government activities, and we were really blessed by having them be part of the process this time. So taking all that information, the scenario development, the data from the cities, we then were crafting our plan, our draft plan. And that draft plan is going to go to our board hopefully next month. And hopefully the board's going to authorize us to release the plan for public comment, and you all can have a chance to take a whack at the plan and get comments back to us on your likes and dislikes and whatever is on your mind about the draft plan. We expect the plan to be in public circulation through February, and ultimately that comes back to us, all the comments come back to us, and we prepare a final plan for the board to approve in April. One of the state mandates that we have in the plan is under SB 375. We're required to make sure that as we put this plan together, that we can show, with the data involved, we can show that we would reduce greenhouse gases by 19% by 2035, and that's from the 2005 levels. We are hopefully going to be able to demonstrate that we can get to that point, because there's a lot of good work that's going on at every level within our region that we can aggregate to show that we can get there. Real quickly, and I don't think you need to worry about this. There are some things that have changed since the last plan to this plan. That's mostly my problem to deal with. You don't need to worry about it. But the key one is the target that had changed. The old target in 2016 plan was 13%. We now have a 19% plan. This is one I really wanted you to see, because in our plan, one of the goals is at the bottom right there. You see, it talks about disaster resiliency. That's an element that our policy board had put in there to say this plan should also be thinking and be talking about how we enable this region to be able to recover from a disaster. So we have some conversation about disaster resiliency among all the other 9 things that are our goals. Performance measures, we have measures in the plan which we would continue to review to see over time how the plan's attaining those 8 performance measures. And then, of course, the next steps, we have a draft release. I think I already talked about this, where we will get to the final plan in April of 2020. I'm going to stop there. There are some important considerations. I don't think you need to worry about this. This has to do with, and maybe you need to worry about it. You might have seen in the news that the federal government is taking the California waiver on tailpipe emission mandates. That has some implications for our plan, but that's too technical to have a conversation about here. So with that, I'm going to just let you be. Thank you for the time.